something to happen. We are here to make a dent in the universe. Either we will change the remittance universe, the way you understand, the way value gets transferred across the world, between people, between institutions, or we will just fade away. So it's almost 0 or 1. That's the reason 6 years ago, we were born with the mission of moving money like information moves today, right? And we are making it possible working with the existing ecosystem. So I think this is a key differentiator about Ripple, and that's the reason we are a monoline company.
It hasn't really evolved. It's based upon swift messaging between correspondent banks. The cost of supporting that infrastructure, frankly, has gone up. One of the things that changed after the financial crisis of 2009, 2010, it used to be if the Bank of Dan and the Bank of Brad wanted to do cross-border transactions, we'd have what's called Nostro Vostro accounts. It used to be that when I put cash at the Bank of Dan, that counted positively towards my capital ratio. After that financial crisis, we decided that trusting other deposits at other banks may not be as trustworthy as we thought, and so now it doesn't count. And so banks have contracted. The correspondent banking relationships have gone down by 50% in the last 15 years, yet global cross-border transactions continue to grow. So our view is, look, these are technologies from decades ago. We can upgrade them with today's technology, with the internet-based technologies, and make this real-time transactions.
The currency devaluations, I've been complaining about that for a long time. And I believe that we will all eventually, and probably very much sooner than a lot of people understand or think, we will be all at a level playing field. Because that's the only way it's fair. That's the only way that you can fairly compete in trade and other things.
I think we're very close on opening financial services and the currency stability deal, which is essentially an IMF deal.
This is intended to be a level playing field, whether you're MoneyGram or you're a bank or you're an online or you're PayPal. This is intended to be a level playing field.
There's a new rail created that's a blockchain rail that both bank and non-banks can participate in to settle transactions through a token. It's coming our way faster than we like, perhaps faster than the 5-year time frame you outlined.
Digitization of the plumbing and other aspects of our financial system, including payment transfers, it's here.
This year.
It's here. It is here already.
Yeah, I see. It's here. Yeah, it is here.
The, what I'll say, just the natural economic forces that it unleashes, taking fat out of the system, for lack of a better term, it's happening. Now we have to recognize that that's happening, recognize our mission, safety and soundness, investor protection, fair markets, and ensure that as that digitization takes place, we're being true to those principles. But we should not be fighting that digitization, because if we fight it, it will go around us.
Most important person in cryptocurrency that you've never heard of. In spite of actually helping build the technology that led to the creation of the 3rd most valuable cryptocurrency in the world, XRP, he was largely behind the scenes. But earlier this year, he was actually promoted as Chief Technology Officer of Ripple and has really come out of late as a leading face in the cryptocurrency space. David Schwartz was tapped on the shoulder by the founder of Mt. Gox, one of the biggest and most notorious cryptocurrency exchanges in the world. He had recruited David Schwartz to test an idea. Could he make a blockchain, but without so much computing power? David and Jed believed that they had done that. While normal Joes like myself can still buy XRP if we wanted, their actual target customer, where they're hoping to make their revenue in the long term, is banks, which are currently connected through a centralized authority called SWIFT. But there's some controversy in all of that. Unlike the Bitcoin blockchain, which creates Bitcoin through a process called mining every 10 minutes, XRP was created all at once and then has been slowly divvied out to different parties over the years. The end result is that Ripple itself now owns the lion's share of the cryptocurrency, and there's been measures that Ripple has taken to ensure users that they won't spend all that cryptocurrency on a bunch of Lamborghinis and drop the price, but there's still a feeling of concern about this one entity owning so much cryptocurrency. And another controversy is that the network itself may or may not be as decentralized as more traditional public blockchains like Bitcoin and Ethereum. Of course, Ripple stands firm on the fact that its methodology is in fact more decentralized than Bitcoin and Ethereum, but there's a lot of doubt about the complicated decisions that they made that perhaps have really just created another SWIFT. Another SWIFT that might do things faster, another SWIFT that might do things cheaper, but really just another middleman.
Cash, obviously, we have MasterCard Direct, we have all these different methodologies, and my question is, can we have a approved regulatory payment rail that's blockchain based, that's available to banks and non-banks equally, where someone could propose a blockchain effort, and what does that look like from a regulatory point of view? That rail, so it's not a debit rail, it's not a credit rail, it's a blockchain available digital rail. Whether there's a cryptocurrency involved or not, be neutral on that. What are your thoughts, Ms. Ford, on that?
I'm not sure how authorized I am to speak on that issue. I'm not an expert on that type of technology, but I would say that I don't think it would be a limitation of technology being, able to support that rail. I think it would actually come down to whatever policy implications there are. And I think, Christina has alluded to some of this as well, that I think, there is an inconsistency in the way that, blockchain or just distributed ledger is regulated today. It seems to be happening mainly at the state level. And so that kind of inconsistency with the regulatory environment might be one of the limitations that could exist.
Mr. Ahmed, do you want to comment on that?
I would just note that, for the kind of core banking architecture, I think there would probably be some changes needed in terms of the Federal Reserve System. But for, smaller valuation or smaller amount payments, I think you already are seeing some blockchain-based systems being created that enable the movement of money. So I think there are examples out there. We talked about XRP or others that kind of offer this.
We bring everybody along with us as we make this technology jump.
Sure. Thank you for the question, Mr. Scott. So I think it has to be done in partnership. So PayPal's a technology company, but there are all sorts of entities that are on the ground in the communities, in the places where you're talking about. Think of retailers, maybe a 7-Eleven, a Walmart. Think of a remittance provider like.
I think XRP is so interesting, and it reminds me of the early days of the internet, and I think it's being grossly underestimated by so many of you out there that consider yourself maximalists within the community or just don't understand the tech, is that they have a very, very micro, super defined niche, which I think is very, very rare among the cryptocurrencies that I typically review at my course, and I review a lot. And full disclosure, again, not financial advice. I am a very large stakeholder in XRP, so I do have a self-incentive to see XRP, the token, successful. I have an incentive to see Ripple successful. So I want you guys to obviously know that. I always disclose what I own and what I'm buying and selling, and I go into more detail on how to do that and how to trade and work with exchanges, all these kinds of things at BitcoinRich.com. So why do I think a lot of people are grossly underestimating the potential of the technology of XRP, the token, and then the company itself with many business relationships and banking relationships already established, and then its consensus ledger? Well, the primary reason is it has a very defined micro niche. And this is typically the product of very, very successful companies that enter a marketplace with a defined niche. In fact, this is one of the first things I teach at my social media marketing courses. Find a micro niche and stick to that later become whales. So let me give you an example of this, and we'll go over what the micro niche of Ripple, the company, is in a moment. Probably the best example of this is Amazon. Jeff Bezos truly was a genius in the early days of Amazon because he didn't try to tackle the entire market. His original idea, maybe it was his long-term strategy, to become a monopoly. But his original entrance into the market was to do one thing extremely well with a micro niche that solved a problem in a very specific area, that did it better than all competitors in the world and did it differently for the first time that nobody had ever seen before. And so what was Amazon's micro niche? Amazon's micro niche was, of course, selling books online. It was a virtual online bookstore. And
1,000 times, but I have to ask you, are you an owner in Ripple or XRP or both?
Well, Ripple is XRP is the Ripple currency. Yes, I'm an owner of Ripple or XRP. I'm an owner of Bitcoin, Bitcoin Cash, Tezos. I'm an owner of Aragon. I'm a believer. I think this is, it's happening, it's coming. It's so important for the world, and I want the world to know it, and I want other people in the world to get on board.
But I've heard you talk
all around liquidity. And the kind of elephant in the room is today the world locks up around, I think it's around 10 to 15, whatever, $trillion at any one time in balances and nostros in different parts of the world to fund payments, which are sent in great big chunks at the end of day or end of week. The opportunity here with CBDCs running domestically and with a bridge asset, another cryptocurrency model, a bridge asset to connect those CBDCs together, the opportunity is to deliver liquidity on point, in the moment, in microseconds, from one part of the world to another. And the model that we focus on is using XRP, which is a very high velocity and very high volume digital asset. It's a free floating asset, unlike a CBDC or stablecoin. Use it as a bridge currency between these CBDCs. So you imagine a world in future where there are, let's say, 180 individual CBDCs per jurisdiction in the world. Making markets between those CBDCs is quite challenging unless you have a common single point, the bridge currency, which then enables connections to be made more efficiently and markets to be made between these individual currencies. So you put that together with both a bridge currency between those CBDCs and the overriding ledger connection between the blockchains that run those CBDCs, and you are kind of redefining how value is moved cross-border. It's a complete departure from the messaging model that we've automated but haven't changed. And it moves into an immediate liquidity, a non-trap cash, a wallet-to-wallet, a micro-payment model. That's also really important for extending reach. European Union being a very strong, developed economic bloc, it's in a great position to then help leverage and grow inclusion around the wider region across Eurasia, Sub-Saharan Africa, Middle East, South Asia, Southeast Asia. And by leveraging what you're doing in the European Union and with the directive that you've currently propagated, leveraging that to benefit those who need very high volume, very immediate, low value micropayments with very limited liquidity tie-up, it's a massive opportunity.
That we have some international reserve currencies. So you have reserve currencies that are also recognized as assets by multiple countries. There are several of those. And so for a transaction to take place from country A to country B, it's not just a matter of two currencies sort of coming together. It's a matter of exchanging from the originating currency into a reserve or a recognized international currency and then back out again. And this is primarily true in developing markets. In developed markets where the country's currency happens to be a reserve currency, well, there's essentially only one exchange that takes place, or the recipient is willing to accept the reserve currency. In the digital world, rising
to reach a final agreement by mid-2021. On the financial sector's issue, we have made significant progress. We just endorsed the G20 roadmap to enhance cross-border payments to facilitate cheaper, faster, more inclusive, and transparent payment transactions. This would yield substantial benefits for households in developing countries and increase the presence of small and medium enterprises in the international trading system, benefiting emerging and advanced economies alike. While responsible technological innovation can deliver significant benefits to the financial system and the broader economy, we are closely monitoring developments and remain vigilant to existing and emerging risks. We agree that no so-called global stablecoin should commence operation until all relevant legal, regulatory, and oversight requirements are adequately addressed through appropriate design and by adhering to applicable standards. On the pandemic preparedness, I am sure that we all recognize that the COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted systemic vulnerabilities in our capacity.
Religious wars and people with extremely strong points of view. You know, when you see that, how do you think about delineating between the religious wars and utility versus just ideology?
Well, first of all, it was surprising for me. So when we announced our fund, which is Arrington XRP Capital, and so we obviously have some ties to the cryptocurrency XRP, I just thought people would welcome me to the industry with open arms as a new player and, you know, expanding the universe of crypto. And I realized, like, immediately I ran into like a brick wall of people who hated XRP with a passion that I had never seen before. And you're right, it's a religious viewpoint. It is worse than even the open source versus closed source battles that we've had decades ago now. And so I was very surprised and shocked, actually, like literally shocked. Like the people who hated me, who I never met just because I had chosen apparently one side of the crypto war. It is understandable now because we're dealing, I realize in hindsight that we're dealing with money. And so it's technology that's tied to money. People get very, very emotionally involved in that. And so I just continue to try to not be involved in the religious side of it. I don't know if I answered your question, but that's the only way to really deal with this, in my opinion. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, the question I'm really trying to get to is, you know, I believe that one of the ways to separate out between the, I don't know if this is a word, but the religiosity and the reality is through utility. And you know, I'm curious that you've now been in the industry for a while. You know, I'm curious what you see, what actual problems have you seen out there being solved? You're like, oh, that actually, that can scale. And this isn't to say there's a lot of.
No, I understand your question. I understand your question. So I think, first of all, blockchains and cryptocurrencies clearly are a killer app for that is money. I mean, Bitcoin is money in my opinion. And it is more money than any previous money. It is more gold-like than gold itself. And so I think that nobody would argue that it is, nobody, even the Department of Justice wouldn't argue that it isn't money. In fact, our governments are now concerned that it's such good money that it's being used for nefarious purposes in some cases. So the real question is, what else is it good for? And I think that it's good for a lot of things. Now, one thing it's good for is cross-border transactions. Now, that's still money, but I think Ripple, with some of the software you built, has proven out that like cryptocurrencies are like particularly useful when you want to get money from one person to another in different countries. You can avoid a lot of the just extravagant fees that have historically been involved in that. But again, we're still talking about money. Another area which this year has become sort of obvious is DeFi. And to some extent, I think XRP is actually the original DeFi coin. I think there's an interesting argument for that as a blog post we're kind of thinking through right now. But the DeFi that we've seen this year has been fascinating. It's the best way to think about it is it's financed without a bank or a financial institution, and it is permissionless, meaning you don't need somebody's permission to get a loan or to loan money. You can just do it, and nobody can stop you in some cases. And we've seen these. The idea that the word that people use is compostable. And so the idea is you build these building blocks of finance that can be stripped down to their most primitive state. And then you can put different building blocks together and create entirely new products. And also they work with other products as well. They're Legos. And that is really interesting to me. And that was really hot over the summer. It's cooled off.
Effect payments in a digital way, in a cheaper way, in a faster way, in a more secure way. And I think that on all these accounts, a digital currency that falls under the ambit of a central bank is actually addressing all three issues that are on consumers' mind and on European minds. It's not a 100% rosy story, because it clearly, number one, it's difficult and it's a time-consuming project. It's not going to happen overnight if and when it is decided. Number two, if it has great benefits of being cheaper, faster, more secure, and responding to consumers' preferences, it also has its downside. And clearly we need to consider all the consequences that it would have, depending on the way it is tailored, depending on the way it associates our current, usual intermediaries, so that we don't disrupt the system. But I think that it is here to stay with us. It's not implemented yet. Decision has not been made yet. We are still in the review and consideration stage, but we've just launched a public consultation so that consumers and Europeans can actually express their preference and tell us whether they would be happy to use a digital euro just in the way they use a euro coin or a euro banknote, knowing that it is central bank money that is available and that they can rely upon.
You mentioned a consultation with the general public, and you always have been a great believer in communication, including with the general public. And you recently mentioned that with regard to the independence of the central bank, there is still accountability, and there is a need to explain.
Alternative can provide improvements to people as it pressures the incumbents to provide either better services or lower costs, or to fend off the competition. Do you think traditional banks and remittance companies and other financial service companies are going to start seeing pressure from blockchain alternatives, or are they already?
I definitely think that we're going to see a very interesting push in the next 2 years. And the reason why I say 2 years
is twofold. Number one, because finally in Mexico we have regulatory clarity. And this is very new. Basically, the first fintech license has just been granted, and that'll allow people to start utilizing technologies like this to do cross-border transmissions fully regulated, understanding the extent of the law and what they can do. And I think that's very important because this is a highly regulated business anywhere in the world. Money transmission is. And so a lot of these blockchain first or crypto first money transmitters that were emerging in the United States always had issues, right? When they were sort of like, well, show me the full flow. And it's like, well, and then we get to this crypto exchange in Mexico. And even though we try to do everything above board and be really good with regulators, there was always this, well, what licensing do they have? Well, nothing yet. No, well, that doesn't make, no. Now we've basically figured out a way through licensing and partnerships that allows the entire stack to be regulated. And so that'll give a lot of certainty to regulators both in Mexico and in the United States that this is a sound operation.
Yeah, so we've talked a little bit about SEPA today. Fedor has some APIs that tap into that. So wouldn't it be cool if you had euros in any bank account, say like Deutsche or Credit Suisse, and you could actually send those euros to another account within SEPA, which is pretty fast clearing, but have that money converted into dollars, yen, or whatever other currency is actively trading on the Ripple network? That would be pretty freaking cool. So how are we going to do this? Well, Fedor's got some pretty cool APIs. Ripple also has some APIs, so maybe we can put them together to create this experience. That would be awesome. Yeah. So Patrick already alluded to this, but I'll just reiterate, even though we're API-rits, we need to respect the rules of the high seas of finance, including things like KYC and AML. You might have heard of them. Those can be expensive costs for developers to maintain, so I'm happy to see that Fedor is providing those solutions for the innovators in this space. So let's talk about the links in the chain a little bit to actually make a cross-currency transaction happen. Before I do that, I want to talk a little bit about what a Ripple gateway is. So Fedor is actually acting as a Ripple gateway after their integration. And what that means is that they are holding customer deposits in euros, and if a customer wants to transfer that money through Ripple, they can represent that euro balance on Ripple and send it through. So you can think of a gateway as kind of like a pseudo bank, right? They take in a deposit and they issue you a balance. So we have actors on the Ripple network today that aren't even actually traditional banks that are doing this type of thing. SnapSwap was referenced, and that's going to be a partner of Fedor for settling in US dollars. So gateways sync external payments with corresponding Ripple transactions. Ripple Labs has created a software framework called Gateway D that it can be integrated with external payment systems. So you can write custom code that connects to Gateway D so that those payments are mirrored in real time onto Ripple. So the features of this middleware, things like deposits and withdrawals, you can issue currency, you can do robust payments that are sent through to Ripple, and you can monitor for incoming payments so that you can take corresponding action on the outbound path as well as the inbound path. So yeah, that's a Ripple gateway. So let's talk about links to the transaction chain, right? So if we wanted to take euros and turn them into US dollars with Ripple in the middle, you could use Fedor APIs to initiate a SEPA transaction. You could then have a gateway D set up to monitor for that transaction. Once it actually confirms the receipt of those euros, it can mirror a corresponding payment onto Ripple and send it through into a different currency. So that's the last piece of the chain. All good?
Very clear. XRP is not a security, all right? But even if you want to do this, you want to have this discussion, the SEC, my frustration, as you probably have heard very directly, you brought up in a very nice way. Maybe you should be doing this job and I should be doing that one because I'm not going to be so nice. Over 2 years is not only a problem, it is absolutely unacceptable. Because what this does is entrepreneurs like you and everybody else on this town hall, you start looking elsewhere. Money will go where it's easiest to flow. And the more the government puts in obstacles, and one of them is just inaction, the less opportunity we have to position the U.S. as the leader. And it's an obstacle to growth. So we're going to keep working. Really appreciate all your support. And together, we're going to keep educating these members of Congress. And
it will take a while to get back to the levels of economic activity and employment that prevailed at the beginning of this year. And it may take continued support from both monetary and fiscal policy to achieve that. I just would say that I think we'll have a stronger recovery if we can just get at least some more fiscal support when it's appropriate, when it's appropriate and in the size Congress thinks it's appropriate. I do think that will likely, and by the way, you see a lot of discussion on both sides of the aisle, on both sides of the hill, that suggests generally that there will be something. This will take a whole of government approach, including healthcare policy and fiscal policy too. So it really is, if you want to get the economy back as quickly as possible to where we want it to be, then really it should be all of government working together. Is monetary policy out of power or out of ammo? And the answer to that would be no. I don't think that. I think that we are strongly committed to using these powerful tools that we have to support the economy during this difficult time for as long as needed. And no one should have any doubt about that.
I was running for Ripple for the last 3 years, the APAC MENA business, and MENA has been the fastest adopter of technology from Ripple to date. So we have signed banks in Saudi Arabia, in the UAE, in Oman, possibly in Kuwait shortly. So the appetite for embracing Ripple's DLT technology for cross-border payments, enormous interest. So the enthusiasm of the regulator, the central banks, to also encourage the use of Ripple technology to build new infrastructure for payment rails, not just within the country, but across the GCC, I think augurs really, really well for the adoption of the latest technology in this region.
So we at Banco Santander and 15 other financial institutions, Credit Suisse, UBS in Switzerland, KBC, ING, Commerzbank, Santander, Eurozone, Barclays, Lloyds, pounds, Bank of New York, Mellon, State Street, NASDAQ, dollars, CIBC, Canadian dollars, MUFG, Mizuho, SMBC, Japanese yen. 15 banks have been working on creating central bank digital currency as a consortium for the last 3.5 years. I've been working on this for 3.5 years. Quietly, the central banks had said to us, shh, say nothing. And then our friends at Facebook announced Libra, and all of a sudden, thank you, by the way, because we were allowed to talk about what we've been doing of central.
So some ways similar to the Bitcoin protocol, some ways very different. The way we view this is, first and foremost, this should be a distributed payments protocol. That sort of comes first before the math-based currency. We think that's really what the world needs, this idea of an internet for value, which we can talk about. Second, it is a math-based currency. Like Bitcoin, math-based currency simply means a currency without a counterparty, which is a really unique thing in the world. It plays a really, really unique and important role in building an internet for value. And then third, very differently from Bitcoin, because Ripple is value agnostic. You can put anything in there. You can put Bitcoins themselves in there. You can put airline miles, dollar, euro, yuan, real. Anything can be in Ripple. It ends up being, we think, the world's first distributed currency exchange. So that's kind of the Ripple protocol, those three things.
Bank-led world now. Central banks are sucking up all the assets all around the world. If they're taking on too many of those toxic assets, I think the IMF is getting ready to roll up all of those central banks into one IMF central bank digital currency. So the trends is, this is what they've been looking for a long time. So the IMF came out of the last Bretton Woods meeting in 1944 when they removed the gold standard and moved it to a gold dollar debt back standard. And then in 71, the US decided to remove the gold standard and move it to a full fiat debt-based Ponzi scheme. And so IMF started losing some of their significance in the plan. So now this is the latest move of making sure that they get first to market with the central bank digital currency. China's being the test bed at the moment, but they don't want China to start getting traction around that. And so IMF, World Bank, Bank of International Settlements, they're getting ready to put together their one global digital currency. And they're calling for Bretton Woods 2 so that they can start implementing and rolling out.
Old systems are not fit anymore for the 21st century. It has laid bare the fundamental lack of social cohesion, fairness, inclusion, and equality. Now is the historical moment, the time, not only to fight the real virus, but to shape the system for the need for the post-corona era. But we have another choice. We can build a new social contract. In short, we need a great reset. We have to mobilize all constituents of our global society to work together. We must not miss this unique window of opportunity.
Financing conditions remain favorable. And this is why the Governing Council announced last month that we will recalibrate our instruments as appropriate to respond to the unfolding situation. The Council is unanimous in its commitment to ensure that financing conditions remain favorable
to support economic activity and counteract the negative impact of the pandemic on the projected inflation path. In the weeks to come, we will have more information on which to base our decision about this recalibration, including more evidence on the success of the new lockdown measures in containing the virus, a new set of macroeconomic projections, and more clarity on fiscal plans and the prospects for vaccine rollouts. While interest rates
that I would like to share with you all. I'm pleased to announce that HDFC Bank, largest private sector bank in India, has joined Ripplenet. They will be a key receiving partner into India, and our team is incredibly excited to work with them. Many thanks to our speakers today for taking the time to share their insights, and thank you all for joining us. We appreciate your time and participation. If you want to learn more about what we have covered, feel free to reach out to our team directly or through our website at ripple.com. From the Ripple family, again, a big thank you.
Of finance, or DeFi, powered by blockchains and other distributed ledger technologies, the rocket fuel for which is crypto. Now, this is no small change. It could be tectonic in scale. Blockchain technology is to the financial system what the internet was to libraries and post offices. Regulators and incumbent service providers, all of them, need to get ahead of this or be relegated to economic history. The change is real. It may have taken a little bit more time than we thought, but it's now here, and it's large. About 60 million Americans own some form of cryptocurrency, and more than a quarter of institutional investors hold crypto assets in their portfolio. Total market cap of crypto, last time I checked, is between $350 and $400 billion. As a financial regulator, whether I like this or not, I can't ignore the increasingly important aspect of crypto in the world of financial services. This means banking, and I say banking because blockchain fundamentally is a banking technology. It records transactions, it enables the exchange of value in the same ways that bank clerks and Wells Fargo stagecoaches once did in the 1860s, except blockchain enables this activity to occur instantaneously with backups throughout the network, and network participants constantly validating and checking the exchange of information.
I do want to talk a little bit about crypto because there's lessons to be learned, I think, from the crypto space that may apply to the CBDC space. And Usman, I might come back to you on this one because I know PayPal is engaging that area. Are there lessons you think that can be learned from the last few years' experience in crypto and its growing maturization that might be applicable to the development of CBDC over the coming decade?
Sure, no, and certainly, we had some news, I guess, about 10 days ago on this front in terms of launching the ability to buy, sell, and hold for specific cryptocurrencies in the PayPal digital wallet. I think the first lesson is, we did it in compliance with existing laws, right? So having that, as Kabir keeps alluding to, having that regulatory infrastructure and the confidence to be able to offer a product that's going to be overseen is actually very important for the private sector. And so this broader effort that Chris, you're leading is just so important, I think, as we're building this out. The second piece is being able to have those digital wallets that offer security, connectivity into the individual users. This public-private partnership that's also at the center of what the DDP is doing, I think, is the other key learning that we are taking out of this is how do we build the ability for people to add new forms of payments, money, assets into their wallet, because that's what people want, and they want to be able to use different, there are different tools that, as we've said many times on this call, I don't think any of us see CBDC replacing all the other forms of payment. They're going to continue to exist because they have uses. So that's really, I think, one of the big learnings for us is how do we continue to add functionality for different users based upon what they need and what they want.
The payments being made are still in fiat currency, still Canadian dollars to Philippine peso. However, they're using XRP just as a tool to source that liquidity. So XRP in this lens, it complements fiat currency. When we think about other virtual currencies, say Bitcoin, for instance, that's a tool that's being used to replace fiat currency. So the consumer would take this currency and use it to buy its coffee with instead of using the central bank's currency. So in that approach, it becomes inherently competitive with the central bank's own currency. With XRP, we've taken that similar technology and applied it in a way that complements fiat currency. It helps banks source currency immediately.
From the Bretton Woods system,
we should have said governments aren't allowed to accumulate reserves. Why should they have reserves? Because the point is, governments would not be called upon to exchange currencies. That would all be done in the private sector. And instead, we have governments happily accumulating reserves. They can use them to intervene. We've seen central banks become empowered and in a position to shift exchange rates with just raising an eyebrow, and I think undermining the whole logic of free trade. This would be Milton Friedman's worst nightmare. He did not want to empower central banks and to enhance their ability to intrude upon private sector outcomes, and he detested the idea of a dirty float. So I know that he would not like what we have today, and that's why it was at the time that we went to floating rates. If you asked 90% of economists, they would have been against it. So the trend changes, and just now, if economists now say, no, we don't want to talk about stable exchange rates, or anything related to gold is somehow nostalgic or backward looking, I think they're not being sophisticated in a way and thinking forward to what kind of a future world with globalization, what you could use if you wanted to have a neutral, unified money system, if you wanted to have a common reference point with no political baggage, that is, it wasn't dominated by any one country. But the fact that gold is acknowledged around the world and it is priced in any currency, if countries or even private cryptocurrencies used gold as a reference point, and in order to trade, you had to have some kind of ability to relate currencies with reference to that common denominator, now I think you're talking about a logical, unified monetary system.
And I can imagine in the next 5 years, instead of us doing sterling against the dollar or sterling against yen and doing these kinds of transactions, we'll do sterling versus Ripple. And the reason being, dollar right now is a 2-day settlement. With something like Ripple, you could do settlement in seconds. And I think that there's a future there where the guy that's trading spot FX today will be trading spot FX against Ripple in the future, in the next 2 or 3 years. So I think that Ripple has a great future because it's right now supported by all the banks and by all the regulators.
And it has an elastic monetary base, right?
So well, if we take that and you go to the blockchain ledger, if you take that concept that you're discussing, I have no problem with it. I agree with it. But you're talking about money. You're talking about transaction, a medium of exchange. There has to be something behind it, and that's where I'm going to pull this conversation back to gold. There has to be some sort of reserve asset. The problem with fiat currencies right now is that
about a functionality of RippleNet that a lot of people have questions about. Multi-hop. What is it? How does it work?
Well, first off, multi-hop gives RippleNet members the ability of transacting with banks or payment providers or digital wallets that they don't have a direct relationship to. That's so important because in today's world, you need a bunch of bilateral relationships clunkily put together in a chain in order to move money. That means A has a relationship with B, B has a relationship with C, and they have to hand off information like playing a game of telephone. Multi-hop makes that a thing in the past.
So who on RippleNet is using this feature?
So a couple weeks ago, we announced that Siam Commercial Bank was using multi-hop. And what that means is they are allowing customers to facilitate payments through Siam Commercial Bank into Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, Thailand, and Vietnam. So the sender has the ability of getting deep reach and deep access into this entire region, and the receiver has the ability of getting payments with more value in them because the fees are less, with complete visibility and transparency.
And is this relationship both ways? So those receivers that you were saying are in Laos, Thailand, Cambodia, can they send payments out through multi-hop to the other institutions they're not directly connected to?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So one of the great things about the technology that underpins this is that it works like the internet works. Information can go both ways. So Cambodia can facilitate payments outside of that relationship back into RippleNet. Very much how the internet works today. So like the internet, there's a lot of paths of getting your money or your information where it needs to go. So one of the things that multi-hop allows are multiple quotes to be returned to the user. And those quotes will have different paths of payments that are available. So you can choose based on the cheapest path or the fastest path, and make sure that you're able to deliver your customers the type of experience that they need. Now, what's great about this is that some of these paths, what we're seeing already in terms of the tests that we're doing, are the cheapest and the fastest when they go through XRapid.
Provide some gosh darn clarity, right? That'd be the first thing we could do. That doesn't sound that hard.
But over what issues in particular?
Well, I mean, look, part of what you're dealing with in the U.S. government is the decentralization, ironically, of authority. So if you went to the UK, there are really only one or two regulators you ever need to talk to. There's the Bank of England and the Financial Conduct Authority. And if you deal with those two regulators, you've more or less covered your waterfront. Here, you've got a banking regulator, you've got a bank holding company regulator, you've got a bank deposit insurance regulator, and then you've got the securities regulators who are separate from the commodities regulators. So the questions I look at are, in my little world of banking, it is, how can we envision a role for banks in a decentralized financial environment? That's something we need clarity on. And then what are the legal powers of banks to custody, to transact, to accept deposits in, or to remit payments in crypto denominated assets? Those are kind of the banking questions.
Is literally Ripple's biggest fan. Like, Kitao-san is trying to make XRP and Ripple successful everywhere. Let me give you an example that'll seem crazy to you, but it's actually true. So there's going to be the next World's Fair. Can you imagine they still have these things? World's Fair is going to be in Osaka in like 2025, something like that. I don't remember.
Wow, they still have those? Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I know, right? That's what I say, right? It's going, if he gets his way, the CEO of SBI, it's going to be, if you go there and you want to buy anything from a Coca-Cola to a hamburger, it's going to take XRP. You can only pay an XRP. That's what we're working towards. Okay? Wow. That's just one little example, right? Sure. But more important to that is replacement for international wire transfers in SWIFT, right? So I'm meeting all the time with these like bankers, central bankers. I met with the head of the central bank from Cambodia last year in December. And they're looking for alternatives to technologies like SWIFT because they want to get out from under the thumb of the US Department of Treasury, which sort of runs the global banking network, right? I mean, SWIFT is a Belgian company by definition, but it's there's a lot of US influence in a lot of things in banking, right? Yeah. And so, technologies like that are legal, like Ripple's tech, are really attractive to a multitude of parties.
Chief Executive, EMEA, and Asia Pacific at SWIFT to talk about the changes happening in the European landscape payment space. Alain, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
What are the main changes that you're seeing?
You would argue actually that the European payment space and security space has been a constant transformation over the last 15 years. Actually, since the creation of the euro currency, the authorities, the central bank, have had to implement the rails that can really help the industry to leverage the power of the single currency. Nowadays, what are we talking about? We're talking about the ECB creating a new gateway, a single access to all the market infrastructure that they're running. They're running today T2S, they're operating T2, and they're also operating the new TIPS platform, which talks about instant payments. So the ECB is going to propose to all the banks by 2021 a single gateway to all those systems. Now, the real challenge for this is that all those systems, when they'll be live, will be talking in ISO 20 or 22. And therefore, it means that for all the current players today on the T2 platform, the high-value payment platform, will have to migrate to this new syntax. And that obviously will represent a huge challenge for the industry.
So what about faster payments? How does that fit into the European transformation?
Part of the SB platform, we're talking about this TIPS platform that is a new instant payment system that will be supporting or actually providing another customer experience to everyone in Europe. Other systems are also, by the way, in development, like AT1 from the EBA clearing company that they've moved, they're proposing those services. So in that context, we're doing 2 or 3 things. We're proposing access to those platforms over the SWIFT network. It's clearly one thing. But also, we're trying to leverage our GPI initiatives that has been now live for nearly 3 years and trying to start actually connecting banks, financial institutions from different parts of the world to real-time payment services that exist today in Europe, like TIPS, and making sure that international payments can become, in doing so, as much efficient as domestic payments. In that context,
this inner networking of payments with banks and blockchain and mobile money and all online wallets can work when it's all stitched together. What's the way to stitch it together? The interledger protocol. So another thing that we use is an open source protocol called the interledger protocol, and it connects all these different ledgers. It's an important part. So the ILP is an open protocol. There's lots of individuals, a community group working on this interledger protocol to build this global network. There are over 275 contributors to it, from banks, central banks such as the Bank of England working on this, Saudi Bank working on this, payment companies, big tech companies working on this such as Google, consulting companies, blockchain companies, and Ripple's right in the thick of using this interledger protocol with our software and using XRP to move money across borders, move value across borders. If you think about what happened in the world of the internet, when the internet was developed, there were all of these different technologies, HTTP, TCP, IP networks, Wi-Fi, but the way to connect this all together so importantly was IP, right? And so when we look at value, we look at the interledger protocol as a way to connect all these different networks from the application level through the transport level, and then all the way down to the banks and the blockchains and the mobile money, to stitch this all together and move this through an open source protocol around the world, and ILP does that. So for us, this is all about creating an internet of value. We had an internet of data. It has changed the world, but it is missing that crucial component of moving value. So with the interledger protocol and with Ripple software and using XRP, we've created an internet of value that we've got already 100 customers rolled out in this. We're adding more customers every week, and we think this is really going to create this internet of value that's really going to change the world and finally give us globalization in every way with our stuff, with our data, and yes, with our money. Thank you very much.
You see the future of these digital assets and maybe the role of Bitcoin and Ripple or XRP in that future?
Yeah, so our view is that these digital assets really become supplemental to the existing family of currencies, right? So every country still needs its own, fiat currency for all kinds of reasons. I won't get into it. It's very complicated, right? And I actually think that the big four, the yen, the euro, the dollar, the RMB, they actually, I think, come stronger in this world that we're going into, partially because of digital assets.
Okay.
That these digital assets actually contribute to a world that's more interoperable, where more people around the globe can get access to these big four. And most of global commerce is done in the big four. So I think you have a bifurcation going on. Those big four get stronger. I think some of the smaller currencies, maybe even more of the very small fiat currencies, become less relevant, maybe even disappear.
I follow up that question, I guess. I mean, is there kind of a decision timeline in your mind? I mean, that would be big news in the crypto sphere. Are you?
We have not put a timeline out there. I don't know. I guess because you're asking, it's a fair question. I'll put 6 months within the next 6 months. I feel like we either need to have clarity or we need to move somewhere where there is clarity. And living in that kind of amorphous middle space is not a good place to be.
And I guess
somebody asked me, there was this headline, set of headlines about about the JPM coin, right. And this guy was from Morgan Stanley who was interviewing me. I said, "So is Morgan Stanley going to use the JPM coin?" And he's like, "Well, probably not." And so, well, is Citi going to use the JPM coin? Is B of A going to use the JPM coin? Is PNC? And the answer is no. And so does that mean we're all going to have these different coins? And does that mean we're back to where we are, where there's lack of interoperability? So I don't get it. One more quick thing on JPM coin. So let's think about this. The JPM coin, they announced for institutional customers, if you give them $1 in deposits, they'll give you a JPM coin that you then can move within the JPM ledger. Wait a minute, just use the $1.
Right.
Well, I really don't understand. If you're just moving it within the JPM ledger, and it has to be dollar to dollar, a one-to-one backing, it honestly doesn't actually, I don't understand what problem that solves.
Just given the fact that DeFi is such a rage right now, and it's sort of decentralized financial applications, payments, et cetera, that can be the lowest hanging fruit. I know Ripple Ledger is built on top of open source software, XRP Ledger, so maybe you're a good place to start.
I think that if we want to have customers, they have to have great experiences.
And customers want different things. They're in different countries. Some of them are underbanked. Some of them are overbanked. Some of them want to get revenue. Some of them have local currencies that they don't like. They want exposure to the dollar. Some of them, they want all these different things. And I think it's instructive to look at the internet. Like, why is the internet so great? Because whatever you want, it has it. It offers a broad array of things that are like whatever you want, like the internet's going to have it somewhere. If we build an ecosystem like that, that's what's going to be compelling. And that's going to mean public chains. It's going to mean private chains. It's going to mean DeFi. It's going to mean that it gives everybody what they want. And sure, there will be some things that are more successful than others because there are some things that people want that are more people want. But like, that's the ecosystem we want. We need a regulatory environment that's friendly to an ecosystem like that. We need interoperability so that people can hold the assets they want and aren't stuck in a corner. But if we don't build that, if we don't build that kind of ecosystem, none of us are going to have any customers. Like, there won't be anything exciting to do in blockchain. I really feel that strongly. So I do think that, like, on this front, we're all in this together, and interoperability is going to be the big driver of great user experiences.
And it's now also one of the world's leading fintech hubs. And I know you're going to spend most of your time rightly discussing private innovation, but I want to take this short opportunity to set out the Bank of England's ambitious plan to support your efforts to create the future of finance. As this conference recognizes, the world's becoming increasingly digitized and hyperconnected, and that's bringing enormous new opportunities and along with it, some challenges. This new economy requires a new finance to serve the digital economy, a new finance that balances innovation with resilience, and that new finance requires a new Bank of England, one which will enable innovation and empower competition, all while ensuring the resilience of the financial system. So let me take a few moments to expand. First, to enable the digital economy, the very nature of commerce is changing. Last year, 1/5 of all sales in the UK were online. Next year, it'll be 1/4. The use of cash has declined from 2/3 of all payments a decade ago to only 1/4 today. This new economy is placing new demands on the financial system. Consumers and businesses increasingly expect transactions to be settled in real time and payments across borders to be indistinguishable from those across the street. And to help private innovation meet these demands, the bank is leveling the playing field between old and new. As you may know, until recently, only commercial banks had direct access to the core of the payment system, RTGS. And that made sense in an old world arranged around a series of hubs and spokes, but it's increasingly anachronistic in the new distributed finance that's emerging. So now we at the bank are making it easier for a broader set of firms to plug in and compete with banks. We're the first G20 central bank to do so. Already, 5 payment service providers are members of RTGS, and there's a pipeline of another 20 firms looking to join. Responding to demands from innovators, RTGS will now also provide API access to users to read and write payments data, as well as implement.
Union gets behind and supports the growth of CBDCs and domestic digital assets, then the ledgers that Ripple is connecting to, let's say, for example, from a Canadian repository to, let's say, a French repository, if both of those accounts or wallets or run are supported by digital assets, then the value exchange can be immediate, atomic, and have blockchain integrity, even though both ends of the payment exist in very different blockchain environments, one in my example in Canada, one in the European Union. So we're working on the interconnection. We call the model interledger, interconnecting between digital asset blockchains. Now that, if you like, addresses the need for cross-border payments to flow with the same velocity and the same scale that domestic payments can flow. So you kind of solve half the problem. The second half of the problem is all around liquidity. And the kind of elephant in the room is today the world locks up around, I think it's around 10 to 15, whatever, $1 trillion at any one time in balances and nostros in different parts of the world to fund payments which are sent in great big chunks at end of day or end of week. The opportunity here with CBDCs running domestically and with a bridge asset another cryptocurrency model, a bridge asset to connect those CBDCs together, the opportunity is to deliver liquidity on point, in the moment, in microseconds, from one part of the world to another. And the model that we focus on is using XRP, which is a very high velocity and very high volume digital asset. It's a free floating asset, unlike a CBDC or stablecoin. Use it as a bridge currency between these CBDCs.
The Bank of England for a month, and I had to pay my rent in advance. It cost me $10 and took me 24 hours to transfer the money from Bank of England to Santander UK. So I'm not going to tell you what the platform was. You know what my banks are. The problems with that transaction were that the money was uninsured for the 24 hours that it was in transit, and $10 may still be a lot of money for the Philippine copy editor, but I think there's a tendency to overstate the gravity of the problem. The question, and Brad, this is an honest question. Ripple is, one of your products is to distribute liquidity through the payments system. So the question is, could there be a run on Ripple? In other words, everybody wants your liquidity. Nobody wants to provide it because there is a scenario where people develop doubts for good reasons or bad about the system.
So let me first clarify what Ripple provides. Ripple doesn't provide liquidity. Ripple provides technologies that allow you to access liquidity that exists in the marketplace. In the last 24 hours, the digital asset marketplace traded about $50 billion of liquidity in 24 hours. That includes XRP, but that includes Bitcoin and Ether and what have you. So, could there be a run on digital assets at large? Just the nuance of the question is, Ripple sells technologies. Can there be a run on Ripple? I don't know what that looks like. I mean, I can't really think about that. Could there be a run on digital assets? I don't know. I mean, today again, $50 billion of liquidity, and people are moving liquidity around. For XRP, a settlement happens in 3 seconds.
Numerous people, and this is bankers and regulators who are involved in financial crime, compliance, onboarding, anti-money laundering. This is industry. These are people who talk to the CFOs and CEOs of banks and put the fear of God in them in regards to money laundering and compliance and blah, blah, blah. So there's a lot of validity here. I heard at least 2 people mention that the SWIFT system will be replaced in the next couple of years, in the next 3 years, in the next 5 years. These are people who aren't even in our space. They're in banking and money laundering and compliance and blah, blah, blah.
These are the presenters, too, he's mentioning. These are
speakers. Yeah, this isn't the fat lady from HR. Yeah, these are like speakers, investigators, blah, blah, blah. And yeah, was it? It was Ripple, one of them mentioned, right?
Well, Ripple. Verbatim, SWIFT is going to be replaced. Yeah.
SWIFT will be replaced by Ripple in the next 5 years, blah, blah.
And Token, I'm delighted to share a story with you today. First, a little bit of background. I'm a high-tech serial entrepreneur who has pioneered many key computer technologies, including the optical mouse, desktop publishing, and internet search. My co-founder, Yobi Benjamin, was the global CTO for Citigroup. Our company is funded by former and current executives at Google, Facebook, and Xiaomi. Just over a year ago, we assembled a small army of very talented engineers from banks in places like Google, Amazon, Facebook, Stanford, and MIT, and gave them a very ambitious assignment: redesign the payment infrastructure for the world. Did you know that all of our primary payment systems in the U.S. were all conceived over 50 years ago, before the invention of the Internet? Our goal was to incorporate all the great ideas from the last 50 years into our design. Our design approach was to start with a clean sheet of paper and design an elegant payment system that could last the next 100 years. It would be a system that would meet the needs of regulators, banks, businesses, developers, and consumers. Now, we started by making a short checklist of things we needed to update. Now, let's take a closer look at each one of these. Today we have lots of different ways that we can encapsulate monetary value. We wanted a paradigm for representing value in a generic way. Our chosen paradigm is what we call a smart token, which consists of three parts: an underlying asset, the rules regarding access to that asset, and the current state of the token. This allows us to exactly emulate the behavior of any type of payment ever created. And the cool thing is that it is the banks who issue and redeem these tokens. So banks can now issue digital checks, cash, payment cards, and so forth, all electronically and all with unprecedented security. So token keeps banks in the middle of all transaction flows. Traditional payment architectures are centralized. Now, this is problematic for many reasons. For example, the server can fail or be compromised. Token, on the other hand, is a modern client-server architecture with open APIs, so that now
have America rise like a phoenix, not because we have a great president